from Seattle. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back in a minute.
First we got the bomb, and that was good, 'cause we love peace and motherhood. Then Russia got the bomb, but that's okay, 'cause the balance of power's maintained that way. Who's next? France got the bomb, but don't you grieve, 'cause they're on our side, I believe. China got the bomb, but have no fears. They can't wipe us out for at least 5 years. Who's next? Then Indonesia claimed that they were going to get one any day. South Africa wants two, that's right. One for the black and one for the white. Who's next? Egypt's gonna get one too, just to use on you-know-who. So Israel's getting tense, wants one in self-defense. The Lord is our shepherd, says the psalm, but just in case, we better get a bomb. Who's next?
That is Tom Lehrer singing Who's Next? This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. We're broadcasting on over 800 stations. On Pacifica and NPR stations, low-power FM, college and community radio stations. We're broadcasting on public TV stations, PBS stations, public access TV stations, and both TV satellite networks, Dish Network, Channel 9415, Free Speech TV, 9410 Link TV, and on DirecTV, Channel 375. And we're video and audio podcasting at democracynow.org. Our headlines available in Spanish for any radio station to take. Here in the Washington state area, we're broadcasting on the wonderful community radio station KBCS, as well as SCAN, which is Seattle Community Access Network, the public access TV station here. I'm Mimi Goodman. Federal officials have launched an investigation of a radiation leak at the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania Saturday. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission said about 175 workers were sent home when the contamination was detected. Some were exposed to low levels of radiation. Tests showed the contamination was confined to services inside the plant, which is owned by Exelon, the nation's largest generator of nuclear power. In 1979, a partial meltdown occurred in 3 Mile Island's Unit 2 reactor. While nuclear power has long been considered environmentally hazardous, many are considering it as an alternative to fossil fuels in the face of climate change. The government's put up $18.5 billion in subsidies to fund a new crop of nuclear power plants. But our next guest argues now that the new atomic plants are prohibitively expensive. The real issue, he says, is what happens to our old nuclear plants, such as 3 Mile Island. He says the country's oldest plants, most of which opened in the early 70s and were designed to operate for only 30 to 40 years, should be dead by now. Yet, zombie-like, they march on, thanks to the indulgence of the NRC. Christian Parenti is a journalist and author of 3 books. He was guest editor of the nation's special issue on climate change, which just came out. His latest article in The Nation is called Zombie Nuke Plants, joining us from New York. Christian, welcome to Democracy Now! Well, lay out, what do you mean, zombie nuke plants? Where are they? What's happening to them?
Well, they're all over the country. There are 104 reactors in the U.S., and they're all over the country, and they were designed to last for 40 years. And what's happened over the last several years is that half of this fleet of atomic reactors have been relicensed for 20 years. There's actually discussion of relicensing some of them for another 20 years. So what happens in many cases is that new companies bought them. Frequently, these old plants were unburdened of their debt at the expense of the ratepayers, and now you have companies like Exelon, which gave over $225,000 to Obama, and who has contracted regularly with Axelrod, David Axelrod's PR firm, and David Axelrod is sort of the PR genius behind Obama. So they buy these plants, and they're now running them for an extra 20 years. And one of the problems is that radiation makes metal brittle. So these plants are in serious disrepair. They were designed to last 40 years. They're now going to be used for 60 years. And on top of that, there's a process called uprating, whereby these operators can apply to increase the rate at which they operate the plant, in some cases up to 120% of designed capacity. For example, Vermont Yankee outside Brattleboro, Vermont, runs at 120% of its design capacity, and it's at the end of its life. So all over the country, there are these problems of leaks, emergencies, and it remains largely under the radar. And many in the environmental movement talk about atomic power in terms of the future and whether or not we should build a new fleet of atomic power plants, how we'll fight climate change. And that's really not the issue, because new atomic power plants are extremely expensive. If all goes well, which it never has in the construction of a single plant in the U.S., it would cost about $10 to $12 billion. Generally, they cost more. There's $18.5 billion on the table. The problem is the federal government has guaranteed up to 80%, has insured 80% of any private loans that would be made to build a new plant. But no one in Wall Street is prepared to invest in these things unless they get 100% public insurance. So there's really not much investment there for it. There are these firms that would love to get on the gravy train of building atomic power plants. Whether or not they ever come online is a different question. They would like to continue building these indefinitely. And so that's the lobby behind pushing for atomic energy. And it also, basically, it functions as a canard to hide the real issue, which is that we continue to burn coal, which is extremely dangerous for the climate. And the real use of atomic power is to run this fleet of old plants into the ground. And we have constantly these small accidents, such as the leak a few days ago at 3 Mile Island. And so the issue that I discussed in this article was the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The president has the right to nominate commissioners. There are 5 commissioners who run this, and the Senate, unfortunately, has to approve them. And we know how the Senate serves to block, to protect entrenched interests. So Obama took the best commissioner, Jasko, and made him head of the commission, which was a good move. He then had 2 seats open. He appointed one guy who is clearly, according to environmentalists, a proponent of the industry, and one guy who is a safety-conscious professor from MIT. And there will be a 3rd seat open. But what has to happen is this: the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has to be run by safety-conscious people, because we are stuck with at least half of our fleet of atomic power plants are going to be online for the next 20 years. And currently, there's very, very lax safety. There's these companies are again and again found to be in violation of basic safety rules. At Vermont Yankee, for example, Entergy has not hired as many people as it should. It has skipped monitoring radiation. It has foregone routine maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. And similar situations obtain in all of these plants.
I wanted to read to you, Christian, from the Washington Post yesterday, which says the Obama administration and leading Democrats, in an effort to win greater support for climate change legislation, are eyeing federal tax incentives and loan guarantees to fund a new crop of nuclear power plants across the United States that could eventually help drive down carbon emissions. Your response to that?
I think that this is, they think that this is a way of getting conservative Democrats on board, because the construction lobby behind this process of building new plants, 1 or 2 new plants, what might happen with that $18 billion, they might increase that subsidy, the $18.5 billion. 1 or 2 extremely expensive, probably quite safe, but just incredibly expensive plants will be built. But in the meantime, what's going on while we're just debating this future that may or may not happen is these old plants are getting relicensed and uprated continually, and no one is discussing it. So I think that there hasn't been a proper discussion of atomic power in this country for many years.